I'm Elaine Johnson, Senior Food Editor at Sunset Magazine. I am so excited to welcome Perry Hoffman from Shed in Healdsburg, California. Perry is the executive chef, and if you haven't been to Shed, it's this magical place. They call it a modern Grange. There's the restaurant, there's amazing retail shopping for beautiful housewares, garden tools, pantry items. It's kind of like
cheese, meat, produce, fermentation, juice.
Kind of like Sunset come to life in a
I can see that,
in sort of a way. Well, Perry today is going to tell us all about pickling and fermenting, and he's got this kind of mad scientist looking setup here. What are we going to start with?
Well, yeah, thank you so much for having me. And we're going to talk all about pickling and fermenting. There is a big difference between the two of them. Everything really is all fermented, but really what it is, it's preserved. And right now at Shed, just being at kind of, the middle of summer, we're trying to capture all those first summer fruits, the very things that went really, really late into spring, and we're trying to pickle it and preserve it. So when we're sitting there in fall, or hopefully we don't go through another crazy rainy winter like we just did up in Healdsburg,
yes, fingers crossed
but we can come back and find some nice springy, spritzy, kumquats that we took our time and a little bit of effort. Really not that much, though, to preserve the season. So really with fermentation and pickling, there's really two different ways to approach it. If you want a really, really fast pickle, you're going to want to reach for your jar of vinegar or your can of vinegar.
Right.
Probably one of my favorite go-to vinegars for pickling is rice wine. I just really find
mild.
Very, very mild, and you can really taste what the end ingredient is. You're not going to completely overpower it with something like, if balsamic would be way too heavy. Apple cider has a time and a place.
Now that's the easy approach for pickling for someone with no experience,
no
experience,
time, maybe. Within a few minutes, instant satisfaction, and you have a pickle. And also, it is, the right tool for the job, depending if you want it. It's really hard to ferment a peach because we start making booze. But you can pickle a peach.
So bad.
You can pickle a peach with vinegar.
Sure.
So on the vinegar side of things, we would grab things that usually what we look for is things that have a little bit higher sugar, because we're able to actually pickle those and not fruit. Yeah, so we look at fruit. We love like any type of citrus. We love pickling that just because they have actually a decent amount of sugar in them.
Sure.
And then on the vice versa is fermentation. So is actually creating the vinegar as you're going. So starting with a salt brine. So what we really want to do is, and we use a pretty general ratio at Shed, and it's 5%, and that's all you really need. So if we had 5,000 grams of water, we would just weigh out 50 grams of salt.
Nice.
Yeah,
well,
and
what are we going to start with?
Yeah, so let's start.
So
let's start. I want to taste you on one of the favorite things, and I'm really, really excited about it because it kind of will just open up your palate almost immediately before we started all this, and we might end with it because it's almost a little palate fresher. So these are these little fermented kumquats. So this is just kumquats, allspice, juniper berries, green peppercorns, and this has just been a 5% solution. And I just want to show you kind of the quick process. Is literally just adding kumquats into your jar, picking your favorite spices, and pouring a salt water over the top of it. We utilize these pickle jars, which we absolutely love because they have that airlock onto it.
Now you can buy these on.
You can buy them.
Healdsburgshed.com.
You can,
or in the store.
Or in the store, and we have all different sizes for it. Of course, as chefs, we always look for the big size. We want to retain some stuff. So what this airlock does is just as the fermentation process has started, which usually takes about 3 weeks, anywhere from 14 to 21 days, depending on just how warm it is. So our ideal temperature is 68 to 78 degrees. That's where we just absolutely love it because it's not too slow, it's not too fast.
Now, does that mean you should not pickle in the height of summer?
You can just look for that cool, dark storage, whether it's a coat closet. It doesn't want a ton of natural light. Just anywhere in that 68 to 78 degree range, you'll just find a really, really steady fermentation. Sure. So when we add the kumquats and the salt brine and all our spices, there's natural native yeast and bacteria that's surrounding that kumquat. So one of the biggest things for us is just always buy organic fruit and don't wash it. And don't wash it because that's where everyone goes wrong because everyone is like, like nothing's happening. you want a lot of those wild yeast and bacteria that's all beneficial to be on the outside of the kumquat or your fruit or vegetable, whatever it may be. So that yeast takes hold. The salt creates a really healthy environment for beneficial bacteria to grow.
Right.
And then while it's converting a lot of the natural sugars and carbohydrates, it's converting that into lactic acid, which is tart, just like you would vinegar. When you're tasting vinegar, you're tasting lactic acid.
Yeah.
So that's all happening during the process.
Cloudy pickles you can get at some grocery store.
Exactly.
Those are lactic acid pickles. Now, I know you're a chef, you work in weights and all that.
Yeah.
Is it possible for you to convert your formula you were talking about for someone at home who's working with cups, and say if I wanted to make just a quart of kumquats, pickled kumquats, about how much vinegar and how much salt?
So water, so it'd be how much water and how much salt. Yeah.
Right, water.
Yeah.
It's making its own vinegar.
Yeah, so it'd be water and salt. So once again, we would just look for that 5% thing. And honestly, it's really, really important that you do measure it one way or another. It doesn't really matter what matrix you use as long as it's 5%.
So get out your scale.
So weight is honestly the easiest. You could do it 5 to 1 too. It's 5 cups, to 1 cup.
Okay.
You can do it 5 to 1. And honestly, if you do it long enough, it's not that bad if you go over. You just want to make sure there's a bare minimum of 5%. Just because that's really the kind of that base level that you really do need to really keep bad bacteria out of our home.
Now, if you're just joining us, we're with Perry Hoffman from Healdsburg Shed, and Perry is going to put together a whole plate of pickled things, including pickled oysters, right?
Yeah. Show you how to.
Is this a good time to talk about the pickled oysters?
Yeah, pickled oysters.
I was really intrigued with that. This is going to be a salad with pickled oysters, pickled vegetables, and then some fresh lettuces and little herbs and things that are all going to come together.
Exactly. So it's really a full circle. So to really make the pickled oysters, we want to have a really wonderful fermented liquid or pickled liquid. These are pickled garlic scapes. So just when you have oysters, you'd almost always have a mignonette on top or lemon juice, right? So
that's that tart little
usually has a little bit of shallots.
That goes on
Traditionally,
top of the
you'd see champagne vinegar or even champagne from France, and of course it's just a match made in heaven. So we come to think back on salads, like, okay, what does a salad need? It needs a vinaigrette, that's acidity.
Right.
So we're going to use the pickled liquid from here to then pickle our oysters in, just like you would with mignonette on top of an oyster.
Okay.
And then we'll actually turn that little oyster liquid that's pickled into a little vinaigrette.
Oh, nice. So you get bonuses from your process.
Yeah. So much of what we do at Shed is just really kind of having our attitude is really no blackberry left behind, no onion left behind, no fennel top left behind. So we're always trying to think of, well, I don't want to just pour this liquid down the drain. How can I utilize it? It's so good. Well, let's pickle oysters with it. Let's use that pickled oyster liquid to then mix with oil and make a little bit of vinaigrette out of.
So these are
oysters,
the pickled oysters.
Yeah, so all we do is just add a little bit of vinegar right over the top, and it will almost start to cook it just like it would be ceviche. It's the exact same process. That lactic acid has gone in there and just firmed up the oyster, so it feels slightly cooked but also slightly raw at the same time, which is really hard achievement to be able to get. And then we've just mixed a little bit of the oyster liquor. So when we're dumping out all the shells, it's all pickled together. So you have this really wonderful, almost umami, very oceanic flavored vinaigrette.
Now, what kind of oysters did you use?
So these are all Pacific oysters from Tomales Bay. So these are koh-miyagis.
So very close to.
Yeah, the oysters out of Tomales Bay, right here in Northern California, are just absolutely amazing during the summertime. Yeah. So we'll always choose local if we can. But one of my favorite places on earth too. So we're going to create a salad, and we're going to create a salad. Beautiful. So usually with ferments, you'd usually just kind of eat it with cheese or snack them by themselves. We want to show you how you can utilize it in kind of a way that is a salad. It could be a first course or a kind of run and pick and snack, as we call it in the kitchen. So we have some beautiful little gem lettuces from our farm that's attached to Shed, which is Home Farm out in the Dry Creek Valley in Sonoma County.
And just a bonus for people who follow Sunset, I had the pleasure of getting to go to Cindy and Daniel's farm and write about their Thanksgiving feast, and it's truly an inspiring place. They have vegetables there, all different kinds of beehives. They're
beautiful established
vinegar projects. It's just stunning.
Yeah, olives, orchards, chestnuts. We have a greenhouse now, chickens, like you name it. So I love still crisp lettuce. It's one of my favorite things. Pickles, they're salty, they're crunchy, they're briny. It needs something to kind of break up, you know, what would be pickled. So we want to start with some of these little gem lettuces, but they are so pretty. We also have some lemon cucumbers from our farm as well. I've rubbed these down with just a little bit of a fermented rice liquid that we get from our friends Aiden Foods in San Francisco.
Nice. So somebody can buy that if they want to.
Exactly. We sell it at Shed. I know they also ship directly. And you can actually do a quick pickle. You can do a 1-hour pickle just utilizing their fermented rice liquid and just rubbing it on really whatever your heart desires. And the result is a very umami, salty, but also acidic liquid.
Now tell us about this gorgeous magenta vegetable you're putting on here.
So I love watermelon radishes. I'm probably not the only chef out in the world that is absolutely obsessed with them. We grew this varietal at home farm. It came out of the garden yesterday, and so it's really, really fun to have such a fresh vegetable with such a fresh pickle all at the same time.
Stunning, yeah.
So same thing, I rubbed it down with a little bit of the shio koji, the fermented rice liquid, and we're just going to scatter it almost in the style of like carpaccio. That's really kind of the approach that we'll take to plating with this. These vegetables are so fun to kind of pick in and pick around and pick with that, you know, it's kind of fun, like, oh, I just want to taste the radish, which is really hard to do if it's just tossed in one large bowl.
Right, and this is very shareable.
Very shareable.
In fact, I've enjoyed many a plate like this at the restaurant.
Yeah.
There are a lot of
we have some little fermented carrots here, so that we just shave thin. When we fermented these, we ferment them with a little bit of cumin, coriander, fennel seed, a little bit of pimente ville, which is very similar to pimente espelette, if you're familiar with it.
But grown in Sonoma.
Actually grown by my one of my family members. Actually, was just always obsessed with pimente espelette.
I did not know that.
And started growing pimente ville. So I think they have almost 15,000 plants up in Anderson Valley in Mendocino County, just about an hour north of Healdsburg. Yeah.
Now, speaking of your family, you are part of the original French Laundry family.
I am. I wouldn't be here today, and I probably wouldn't be cooking if I wasn't born into such an amazing culinary family like I am. I just was obsessed with food as a child, and still am.
Tell our viewers, not everyone knows that there was a French Laundry before Thomas Keller.
There was. So I was, born and raised in the town of Napa, and my grandparents were Don and Sally Schmidt. They purchased the French Laundry back in 1977. Prior to that, they were helped renovate and really put the vintage 1870 back in order. It was an abandoned brick factory at the time. So. And they saw Yountville, just an amazing little town that could be, because it wasn't back then, and here they are. So, so they ran and operated the French Laundry prior to Thomas from 77 to 91, and then they passed it off to Thomas and we just have, our hands are just, we're all, kneeling at his feet, if we will, know. So, but he has just been so close to the family and wonderful. Sure. So little pickled cucumbers here. I just absolutely love cucumbers when they're fresh pickled, especially when they've gone through the lacto fermentation process.
Yeah.
We do add a little bit of dill seed, so pretty traditional.
Beautiful. Was this like a Persian cucumber or?
Yeah, it was. You're right on. It was a Katrina Persian cucumber, which we work with so many little small farms up in Sonoma, and that's what's just so pleasurable to cook in that valley. At Napa, you have grapes, and Sonoma, you have small farms just growing such beautiful heirloom varietals of everything at this point in time.
Now you've put, it looks like maybe some turmeric in these pickles?
Yeah, so this is actually a bread and butter style. So this has a little bit of turmeric. This is a mixture of summer squash, which is really, really fun. Eats just like cucumber. You should have one. Turmeric, fennel seed, onions, garlic. We'll salt all of these, and then we'll put ice on it overnight, and we'll extract that liquid, then pour it back over and let it ferment. So really, really traditional, kind of fun bread and butter style pickle.
That is nice and snappy. Some bread and butter can be too sweet, and this has a really good balance, and it's still crunchy too, which I like.
Yeah. So right now we're just swimming in fresh herbs, we're happy that we are. Can never get enough Thai basil. We have this beautiful purple ruffled basil that looks very similar to opal basil.
But it's not opal basil, you're saying. It's
not opal. There's so many other different types of purple basil out there that people just don't realize.
Oh, that's incredibly fragrant. I wish everybody could smell that. There's just that basil just smells like summer.
Yeah, it's if we could ferment basil, we would and preserve it. It's a little hard though. Yeah, so fresh basil over the top. And then what's really fun is to come back and, just as I mentioned before, is that utilizing the pickling liquid that we pickled the oysters with, that has the oyster liquor in there, and just adding a little bit of olive oil to it and just making the pickled oyster vinaigrette. So just dropping a few of these Pacific Cove Miyagi's from Tomales Bay right over the top. And just a really fun approach to a different way to enjoy oysters and salad and pickles.
So beautiful. Again, we're with Perry Hoffman from Shed, and he is showing us how to put together a pickled and fresh salad using a mix of quick pickled oysters, a whole variety of pickled vegetables, different herbs, and some beautiful little lettuces. This is the type of thing you can get at the restaurant.
We have a question from one of our viewers. They're wondering, how long are the oysters safe to eat after pickling?
We do a quick pickle on them, so we only let them sit for about 48 hours, 2 days. Yeah, just because we don't, if we were going to add a little bit of citric acid to it, it would cook it a little bit further, like all the way into ceviche. Because we're using a vinegar, it will slow down that process a little bit. And what's really sought after is still that luxurious raw oyster that's been also slightly firmed up.
Crunchy, silky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you wanted it to last longer, you could cook the oysters and store them in vinegar. But in this case, I love the texture how it is now. So 48 hours max.
Now, Perry, I know that you've got a whole line of pantry items.
We do.
Oh, in fact, speaking of which.
Finishing touch.
So you had promised that you were going to bring this crazy ingredient called what?
So this is sauerkraut powder. So at Shed, my entire background is fine dining. So for years upon years, in kind of fine dining kitchens and in chefs' personal pantries behind the scenes of, stainless steel closed doors. And we have our huge kind of, our wall of ammunition, if you will. We're able to go and we always create little ferments and powders and so forth. And it's what we use kind of behind the scenes to help elevate foods.
Can I
Please.
Smell that?
Yeah, so this is sauerkraut powder. So we've literally taken sauerkraut,
wow,
which
it smells like really amazing sauerkraut.
Yeah.
But why is it purple?
So this is started with red cabbage. So it's almost just like explaining with the kumquats.
So
it's a salt brine. It's 5% salt brine water poured over chopped cabbage. Let it sit for 14 to 21 days, depending if it's on the 68-degree side or the 78-degree side.
Right.
And really until it tastes good. That's really what we go to.
Excellent.
And we put it into a dehydrator, and all we do is through dehydration is extracting all the water content. A lot of the water content doesn't have any flavor whatsoever. So what is left is really just kind of the pure flavonoids of sauerkraut. And you get the funkiness, which is lovely, and it's salty and it's briny at the salt all at the same time. So we'll use a lot of these powders just like we would for salt, just to go right over the top and just provide like one little extra dimensional layer of flavor and pickle and ferment. So kind of all in one.
Now, I have to ask.
Yeah.
Would that be great on a hot dog too?
It's good on a hot dog. It's really good. And it's just mixed into like a little bit of house-made mayonnaise on a pastrami sandwich. It is just to die for. Yeah. So yeah, sauerkraut powder is one of our favorite ones. We also do green garlic, shiitake mushrooms, smoked onion, all different types of pickles that we have available in store, and of course we ship. So
now you guys make all of these, right?
Yeah, we make everything.
Do you do them right there at Shed?
Literally a 2-minute walk right down the street from Shed. We have a separate production kitchen that's just rows and banks of dehydrators, large stainless steel crocks that we do all of our kombucha. It's where we do all of our jams and preserves as well.
Right.
So yeah, a lot of stuff that you see that will go into little jars and sprinkled into our own pantry was really started from what we're already doing behind the scenes in our kitchen. So it was really, really natural for us to create a line. It was just do what we do already. Yeah. And kind of get our secret weapons out into everyone else's hands. So
nice.
Yeah.
Shall we
try
this?
Yeah, we should.
Let's do it. And I see you brought some beautiful little flowers.
Yeah,
too.
so, yeah.
I'm seeing little purple borage, which is one of my favorites. That's that cucumbery tasting
Cucumber.
one. It's kind of fuzzy.
Completely,
And,
yeah.
And what's the one that's, is that a nasturtium? That's
Yeah, we
kind
have a
of
little nasturtium leaf.
peachy colored?
Yeah, peachy, which they come in all different colors.
Uh-huh.
They're kind of sweet, they're kind of spicy.
Yeah,
So,
more
you know,
peppery.
in this salad, it will kind of act as like what would be black pepper in the mignonette on top of the oyster, give it a little bit of bite. Borage, as you mentioned, tastes just like cucumber. We'll never just use a flower to use a flower. It's really meant, it needs to make sense. So, and of course, as you mentioned, borage and cucumber and nasturtium adds another little dimensional layer to the dish and spiciness.
Oh, this is
So,
really
yeah.
stunning.
So just really simple little fun salad.
Beautiful. I also see you brought some additional things. There's a pickling mix here.
Yeah, a little pickling spice, which is pretty standard. Allspice berries, tons of bay leaf, chili pepper, mustard seeds, fennel seed as well.
And that's something that you sell on the website?
Yeah, as I mentioned, right now we're just like busy pickling everything, so we have a ton of pickling equipment at Shed right now. Also, preserving for jams, the summer fruits. If you have peaches and plums and strawberries, especially this huge heat wave that we just went through in California.
Yes,
they are just so sweet and just absolutely delicious. So we really want to be able to capture those.
Can I go ahead and
Please,
start?
yeah, don't wait for me.
I think that's about the best sour pickle I've ever had. Just that one little piece, and there's all
Just
these.
which one was it? We have to know which one it was.
That was this one that looks like a sliced traditional pickle. Mm-hmm. It's just perfectly sour and crunchy, salty. I want to try the oyster.
And we have the basil, which we just love because this provides such beautiful kind of aroma, and it's just really lovely and keeps it fresh.
Boy, that oyster it's got a little bit of garlic in it. It's still very tender, but has a tiny bit of crunch too. Salty. I love the idea of the sauerkraut powder, and it's got that beautiful purple pop to it. It looks especially pretty with those watermelon radishes.
Yeah, and even as it kind of reconstitutes itself, it will almost kind of turn into its own little vinaigrette. So you'll almost find this salad just kind of intensifying the longer it sits. It's also really, really fun to kind of transition this into a fall salad when we do pickled squash, and we wouldn't necessarily, we could do,
butternut
and we could
squash,
change
kabocha.
completely, and we could change it out for duck prosciutto or a little cured duck breast or prosciutto, whatever it may be in the fall time. So it's really something where you can kind of come back and almost look at a few of these same ferments, but completely change, the whole kind of storyline of the salad by switching from summer to fall, So really, really fun.
Incredible. Now, if somebody wants to get started with pickling, do we have a question?
We do.
We'll come back to my question.
Yeah.
Is wondering if you can share a little bit about what a shrub is.
Yeah, so a shrub is a vinegar-based drink that's usually mixed 4 parts to 1 with water. We make ours at Shed with usually equal parts vinegar to equal parts fruit to equal parts sugar. We either do a cold maceration, meaning that we, just like we would jam, we would take peaches, organic cane sugar, and we would dress it all together and let that sugar just kind of macerate on there. And just like you would at strawberries at home.
Sure.
And then you have that beautiful syrup. We would let that sit for about a day or 2 days and then strain off that liquid and then mix that liquid with vinegar, equal parts.
And champagne vinegar?
Champagne vinegar,
Any kind of vinegar.
almost just one same thing. You really want to look at what to highlight, the fruit itself. So with the strawberry, we would choose something very light, champagne vinegar, white wine
rice.
vinegar,
Uh-huh.
maybe red wine vinegar. This is a time for apple cider vinegar to shine. If you're doing an apple shrub, we would obviously use apple cider vinegar. With plums, when we do plums and like shiso, Japanese shiso, we use rice wine because it feels so much so rooted in culture and just really lends itself right. And shrubs are so fun. They're so easy. We teach wonderful classes quarterly on shrubs at Shed, and they're just really, really pleasing to drink and refreshing. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Great.
hope that answers your
Good
question.
I was going to ask you, if somebody wants to get started with pickling, what's sort of the minimum that they need in terms of equipment and gear?
The minimum, even if you don't even want to get into the jars and you don't even want to start there, and we'll actually do this at Shed every now and then behind the scenes. So a little pro tip is we'll just take big heavy Ziploc bags or even cryovac bags from our vacuum machine, but it can just be a large Ziploc, and you can just fill the entire bag with whatever your vegetable or if you're doing a fruit may be,
what a good
idea. Bind it really, really tight and just wrap it just so it's still completely submerged in liquid. Tie it off with a rubber band at the top and let it sit just in a container. And that rubber band, because it's able to flex, is able to flex out a little bit when it's trying to push carbon dioxide out, just like our airlock is doing it.
Okay.
And at the same time as pushing out all the oxygen. So that is like the bare minimum is plastic bag, rubber band, and go at it.
Because oxygen is your enemy with
oxygen is it is. It's gonna, any bad bacteria that's in there, it's gonna just like, look at the oxygen, look at me, I can grow now. Right. So that's where, CO2 and an airlock is really, really helpful. So that would be the bare minimum. So it would be really hard to.
Bag. If you can get a plastic bag and some water and a rubber band, you're
set. Little bit of salt. That's all you need. Yeah, you're able to do it. So.
And do you need any special water? Distilled water?
So distilled water is best. We try not to use tap water. That's really at the purest. We've obviously used tap water in professional kitchens. It does work.
Fluoridated water? I know there's a big question about
it. Preferably not. Preferably not. Would it work? Most likely. Is it preferred? No. Simple as that. Okay. Yeah. So.
And what kind of salt? Kosher salt?
We use kosher salt. Yeah. Diamond crystal kosher salt. Really, honestly, any type of salt works. But kosher has always been the workhorse for us and probably will continue to be so. Yeah. We also work a lot with Jacobson salt out of Oregon, and we just absolutely love them. Yeah. They've started to make a fine grain salt, which is really, really lovely. When we are adding salt to water, we usually start with just a barely warm water just to get it dissolved a little bit quicker. The fine sea salt from Jacobson is awesome because it just almost immediately dissolves upon contact.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure we heard about what was in all these jars.
Yeah, so let's go through them. There's so many.
Yeah, because they're really spectacular.
So what's really fun about pickling and preserving is that you can really utilize a part of a plant or a tree or a vegetable that you really couldn't do much with. But through kind of the art and magic of fermentation is that it's able to break down a lot of tannins and just kind of some nasty flavors that you would have if it was raw.
Sure.
So these are pickled green peaches. So these all came from our farm.
Really important. When they were thinning the branches.
When they were thinning, so instead of just letting them drop.
Would be bigger.
Exactly. So we would let them drop into a 5-gallon bucket. Our farmer Stephen brought them to me, and we said, well, let's pickle these. So we added a very simple rice apple cider vinegar, cardamom, a little bit of star anise, and then we pickled them. We cut them right in half to expose the pit.
Oh, because that pit has that almondy.
Almondy, just like cherries would or apricots would, which a lot of people associate with amaretto.
Yeah.
Amaretto's always comes from apricot kernels. So these, so these are crunchy and acidic.
And how would you
peaches.
use these?
These are so good. We have a burrata just right now with pickled peaches with burrata all over the top of it, and they're just absolutely just lovely. And they're that wonderful toasty notes. They're crunchy. They still taste like peach.
Toasty, yum. And the spices are so unusual in that. It takes it away from peaches and gives it a whole.
These are pickled garlic scapes. We have so many farms around us that grow garlic.
A
lot of them let them go to scapes.
What garlic scapes are?
Yeah, so scapes.
Anybody who's not familiar with that?
Yeah, so garlic scape is literally just the garlic plant going to flower. So this would, in about 2 weeks from this date, would naturally bloom and let open seed pods. And of course, every plant's trying to sustain itself and keep it going. So the tops of the garlic are, they're really fibrous, but they have a ton of flavor. They're really spicy, and it's just part of the plant. Like, God, what can we do with that?
I was wondering that very thing in the spring. I should have known I could have pickled them.
Yeah, as beautiful they are in flower arrangements, they do stink up your living room a little bit.
And I eventually put them in the compost, but
so we pickled these. We did not ferment these. We used just a white wine vinegar on this, and a little bit of water to dilute it. That's usually one thing that we will do when we pickle things. We'll add a little bit of water in it just so it's not so intense with the vinegar, and it's just a little bit more pleasing in the back of your throat. So we'll take these and we'll usually mince them down. Right now we have a really wonderful porchetta hash that we do with new potatoes from a local farm, minced garlic scapes. We'll also put this in onto oysters, pizza, poached eggs, you name it.
Oh, that sounds incredible.
So just, yeah, once again, kind of one of those parts of the plant that you just couldn't really use otherwise.
Right.
So.
Now this really looks like a mad scientist kind of thing. What is that?
So these are Japanese Chika turnips. It's a really fun heirloom Japanese turnip. I just started these today. They're long and slender, and this have this really, really earthy turnip flavor. So this is going to go through a full fermentation process, probably at least 3 weeks for this. I'll probably taste it around 14 days. So this is turnips. This has a little bit of long grain peppercorns. We have summer savory in there, and I've never done it before, so we're going to see what it tastes like. So,
what do you think you'll use it with?
I really think I might do a blackberry salad with it. I love turnips and blackberries together.
Turnips and blackberries.
Yeah. So, and it's all about the right ratio and the right cut and the right size. And so much about fermentation and fermenting is inspiring and kind of jumpstarts the whole creative process of what could I do with this, or I don't know what I can do, but I'm going to start with this, and then from that we'll build on to, you know, really other elements of a dish. So yeah, we're excited, and we'll cross our fingers, and who knows. That being said, there's definitely been things that we have fermented before, and you know, Brussels sprouts is definitely do not ferment Brussels sprouts. We've tried it, and it's just, you know, I'll leave it at that. They're
any other disasters that you?
Brussels sprouts, I think, just wiped my memory clean of anything else that might have been a disaster. So.
Many people don't like Brussels sprouts to start with,
and it only
they would only be
intensifies.
Brussels
but then again,
sprouts.
we were honestly, the reason why we did it, we knew they'd be intense. We were looking for in a very, very small amount and flavor enhancer that we could either dry or add back in, almost in the same concept of, you know, MSG.
Oh,
but
sure.
something completely natural of just kind of building body and building umami, but never having to call out on the menu fermented Brussels sprouts. But we'd have never known if we didn't try it. So we did it, and now we know. So, but it's always fun. It's so fun to do at home. It's fun to do with your friends, with your family. There's a wonderful book, Art of Fermentation. I think it's pushing almost 1,000 pages. And it's so fun where fermentation's been. Some of the very first fermentation was documented, I think, 8000 AD in China. And that's when they did a DNA test on old pottery where they found evidence of honey and rice that underwent fermentation in those pots. So
now, is that a book that you recommend for beginners?
Yeah, I do, because I think it's a wonderful place to start. It's
the art of fermentation.
The art of fermentation. They talk everything about fermenting rice, of course, you know, wine, and then wine into vinegar, honey into mead, you know, hops and barley into beer. So you name it. So it's a really, really wonderful spot. Of course, there is simple ones, but it's really wonderfully categorized, and you can kind of go in and pull out what you think that you may need.
Now, you have some fermenting books on the website.
We do, yeah.
Healdsburgshed.com.
Yeah.
Are there one or two that you would call out?
I'm really a lot of them, you know, have provided a lot of the same content, just a different approach to it. There's also just like a chef, when he writes a cookbook, not everyone writes the same recipe for a tomato salad. Not everyone writes the same fermentation recipe for a fermented carrot.
Not everyone's going to share the fermented Brussels sprouts.
Not everyone's going to share the fermented Brussels sprouts. So I think it's, you know, like finding a favorite chef or a favorite author or a favorite restaurant. You know, start with the one that you really like. If you're not really, really happy with that fermented carrot recipe, try somebody else's. Maybe they changed something that just made it something a little bit better, you know, and for your individual palate. So so much fun. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, Perry Hoffman from Healdsburg Shed, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, everyone at Facebook, for joining us as well. And we'll catch you next time.